Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Citizens of the world, listeners and viewers of Live from the Heartland, this is Michael James, and one of my favorite people to have on the show is the one and only Andy Davis. He grew up in Chicago. He's become a renowned filmmaker, a director. He has a new book out called Disturbing the Bones. We hope it'll be made into a movie. And Andy has long had a posse of people from Chicago who are in his films. I'm lucky to be one of them. One of them also was Ron Dean, a well-known Chicago actor, and he just passed away. And our friend Tony Fitzpatrick also passed away. A lot of activity on the death front, couple of wonderful, great guys. Andy knew them both. Andy, how about sharing your thoughts on these two guys?
Well, I'm at a complete loss. Oh boy, I got emotional. These are two of my best friends, including you, and, go way, way back. And they were both, unique Chicago characters. Ron was a kid who grew up under tough circumstances. His father was an alcoholic, left the family when he was 6 months old, I think, and he didn't have a relationship with his dad. His mother had some health issues, and he wound up getting in trouble a lot as a kid. And, he was stealing cars, and he wound up in a reform school. And he fled this reform school, wound up getting picked up by the police. And while he was in jail, he tried to escape. He found a gun that was owned by by the officer who ran the station, shooting him. So at 17 years old, he had killed a policeman, which is, you can't think of anything worse to do. He was sent away for years. He didn't get the death penalty because of his mother testifying what a tough childhood he had. Gave him 20 years. Anyway, he got out after, I think, 12 or 13 years and somehow got involved in theater. He got involved in acting and involved in writing. And he became an institution. Those beloved actors like Dennis Farina and Dennis Franz and Mantegna and Jack Wallace. He became part of this ensemble of Chicago guys who be sort of interesting characters for David Mamet and the Steppenwolf and the Organic Theater and many different groups. Okay, and so I met Ron when I did Code of Silence. He was recommended to me by Dick Cordos, probably, and casting director with Nan Charbonneau, and he was terrific. He was someone who could improvise and someone who could just hold his presence. And he was a sweetheart of a guy, even though he had this really tough background, and people didn't quite know what to make of him. But when they got to know him, they loved him. And I've been getting emails from all kinds of friends talking about how they saw Ron's name on the call sheet for being in the show that week or that day or that month. They knew it was going to be fun. So anyway, he was a real character. And I'll just point out how significant his role was. When we did The Fugitive, Ron Dean and Joe Casala, a real cop, so a guy killed a cop and a guy who
Joe and I always argued.
yeah. Anyway, they're interrogating Harrison Ford about killing us, and and this real honest kind of tough guy. Oh, so your wife's good and had a lot of money. You're going to be a rich guy now. That's Ron's line, And they intimidate Harrison to the point where, are you suggesting I killed my wife? And he breaks down and cries, And I think that performance of Harrison, which is fantastic and resonated so well, he leaned over and gave me it because he realized he was going to be so involved with the audience, have such empathy for his character. It had a lot to do with Casala and Ron Dean delivering that interrogation. He went in Risky Business. He was in 3 movies with Tom Cruise. Rick Hogan did a beautiful about him the other day in the Tribune. So anyway, and Maggie Neff, who was his partner for 40 years, who was this wonderful gal who Ron helped raise her child, and became almost his kid. He was a sweetheart of a guy. He drove pedicabs. He had all kinds of different jobs as a young man, but kept working, and was looked at as one of the most revered Chicago actors.
You know, I think about him kind of regularly, particularly when I'm by the lake, because he told me one time that his father, who you mentioned had been an alcoholic, his father in the middle of the winter just walked out on the ice and kept walking, and that was the end.
Really?
I just remembered that. You know,
Wow.
Ron was not the only fellow who passed away in the last week. Also, Tony Fitzpatrick. I first got to know Tony when I worked in a little short film by Jim Sikora called Walls of the City or Walls in the City. And then later on, he had me three Adventureland Gallery with my photos. He was a wonderful guy, did great artwork. How about sharing a few thoughts on Tony Fitzpatrick, Andy?
Well, you can't share a few words because his career was so amazing. His life was also amazing. Another kid who was, would get banged around by the nuns in Catholic school, because he was a troublemaker, being a boxer for a while. And he somehow got involved in art and theater. Remember, he told a story about his dad. He used to sell vaults for funerals for big people. And he would drive around. He was up near Woodstock, Illinois, and the guy who created Tracy had a house up there. And his father let him knock on the door and talk to the guy, Dick Tracy. It was a huge impression. And so Tony was interesting. His art was a collage art, and he would do these incredible pieces that symbolized what was going on in Chicago. He loved dogs, he loved birds, he loved politics, and he became a great artist, a playwright, an actor, a teacher. He mentored so many different artists, and he was a great family man. He had a wonderful family. His son Max worked closely with him. Michelle, his dear wife, stood by him and through ups and downs, and his daughter, who was a fantastic gal, who wound up in Italy, wound up becoming an integral part of their whole family. So he was a really important character in his own world, but he had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of devoted friends and fans, And then, like you, so he meets a guy whose politics are up the same alley, and he's got these political photographs of relevant things, and he says, "Why don't you come and put it in my gallery, a little show?" And that's the kind of guy he was.
We did an interview with him on this show, which I have to find, and we will post that. He was really quite a guy, and we're going to miss him, and we're going to miss Rondine. It just keeps going on. And Andy, I had a number of things I wanted to talk to you about. You have the new book out. You've done a number of films. We only have about 1 minute or 2 minutes left. I'm going to throw this at you. It's from my cousin Adam, who comes on this show usually talking sports. And you know Adam, he was in some of your movies too. He said to me, Andy, with everything going on in our country and the world today, what character scene or line from one of your movies do you think is particularly important and interesting to think about right now? And he mentions Henry Silva character Zagon or Tommy Lee Jones Stranix. You got any response to that question?
I don't care. That's Tommy's line. If you didn't know. The films, if you go to andrewdavisfilms.com, there's a listing of all the films and stuff like that. There's a political theme about racism, about nukes, about corruption, about justice. Those are sort of the things that, are in my films because I wanted to be a just. And then during Vietnam, I didn't repeating the lies that the State Department was putting out, so I became a filmmaker. So if you go to that, and then, take a look and see Stony Island, a film that this guy plays a guy in, I always
that was my biggest part.
Mike's always a bad guy or a Nazi or, he's got a line in The Fugitive that you hear off screen. Hey, we got a dead one here, a live one here, or something like that.
Andy, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank you for using me in your movies.